Grade 7s, I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I know I got to relax a little bit this weekend. I hope you got to as well. Today's lesson is actually going to be pretty easy. We're going into our new unit, which is on geometry. And we will go into, for now, is going to be types of lines and pairs of lines. And then later on, we're going to go into actually calculating angles. But for today, it's actually going to be easy because I'm going to just tell you about different types of lines, how they're labeled, and that will be your homework, is basically labeling what type of lines they are. So with that, we're going to jump into it. So our first section is on individual lines. So these are lines just by themselves. The next section is on pairs of lines, so two lines together. So first of all, I'm going to tell you about what these types of lines are called, and I'm going to go into how they would be labeled. So this first thing right here, this dot, is called a point. Okay? As you can see, you will sometimes see points on the lines themselves. That's how a line would be labeled. So this one right here, if it has a point on both ends and there's a line in between, so point, line, point, it's called a line segment. Okay, because it's only actually part of a line and not a full line. And there's points on it. The points, let's say I can label this one A and I'll label this one B. I can call this particular line segment, I can call it line segment AB. So I can either write it out as line segment AB, or another way I can write it out is with this type of notation. So if I'm labeling a line, so if I'm given this line on a worksheet and it has 2 points and a line in between, I will call it line segment AB, or alternatively I can call it BA, because it actually doesn't matter which order you put those points in. It could be A, B, or BA, or it could be AB and it has the line with the little dots at the end. You have to make sure it has the dots at the end though, because if it's just a straight up line, sometimes that can be a little bit confusing as to what type of line you mean. So that is our lines right there. This dot on its own is called a point. And if I were to give it a number, or sorry, a letter, it would just be called point M. And that's all that one would be. This one right here, if it has an arrow at both ends and there's a line, that's actually just called a line. The arrows mean it could go on forever because the line has no real beginning or end, it just goes on and on and on. However, if I put points right here, I can now label this line. So let's call it C and D. So now I can call this line, line CD, or how I use this kind of notation here, I can use that notation here with a line with both arrows at the ends of it and just label it CD. So those are different ways I can label it. So you have to make sure when you are drawing a line and not a line segment, a line has to have arrows on both ends because it signifies that that line just goes on. Line segments has a point at both ends. So that means a line segment I can actually measure. If I have a line segment like this, and it's a point to a point, I can say line segment AB is exactly 5 centimeters long. But CD, line CD, the line goes on forever. That's why you have to put points on those lines, because I can label on line CD between points C and D is 5 centimeters. However, the line itself is endless. It could be 1,000,000 kilometers or more long because there's no end to it. So that's why you have to put points on those particular lines so you can measure it. It also gives you a good way to label it. So first things first, we have a point, We have a line segment when it has points at both ends. And then we have a line with two arrows at either end and points somewhere along the lines. However, a line can also have multiple points. So I can put a whole bunch of them in here. And it can have more than just the two. But for now, it would just give you probably 2 or 3 at most. So that's that one. This one here has a point at one end, and it has a line with an arrow. Whoops, I shouldn't have done that. And it has a line with an arrow. This is called a ray. So think about this as a ray of sunshine. Here's your point, your giant point is the sun. And then there's a ray of sunshine shining on a flower. Okay, so a ray is like a ray of sunshine. Here's your point, and then there's a line, and that line can just go on forever, but it starts from a point. It's not like both ends just go on forever. This one starts from a particular point, and that one line just goes off in one direction forever. This one, they go off in 2 different directions. Okay, so that is called a ray. A ray can have a point at this end, and that will be labeled. So let's call this one K. So it'll be called ray K, or K. Sometimes it'll have more than one point on it, but it'll have this arrow at the end still. So it'll be KL. So this could be then called ray KL or KL. So these are the different ways you would label lines. You'd either write it out as line segment with the letters, or you can do this shortcut notation. The reason I'm teaching you both ways is because if you're typing out your answers, you're not going to be able to type this out on a computer. But you can type out line segment AB, you can type out line CD, you can type out ray KL. This would be the notation you would use on pen and paper, if that's what you're using. And that's how you would label them. And that's all it is. That's for types of lines. That's all you need to know is what these types of lines are called and how you would label them. Remember that these letters can go in either order. It doesn't necessarily have to go left to right. So this could be ray LK. This one could be like line CJKLD. It doesn't matter what order they go in. But normally when people write them out, of course, they write them left to right because that's the way we read. So that's it. You're going to have one worksheet that's going to give you types of lines. I think there's only 9 or 12 of them on there. You basically write out line segment AB or line CD or ray KL or whatever the letters are. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Next part here is going to have a worksheet along with it as well. However, I think it only has 6 questions on it. And you just need to label what type of pairs of lines these are. So for a lot of you guys, this is going to be a review. And for some of you, this is going to be something new. But this is also really easy. So this is when we have pairs of lines. This first one right here. If you have 2 lines that go up and down or side to side together, they're 2 lines, but they never ever meet. So they just run along beside each other, but at no point do their paths cross. So they do not cross at one point. So these could technically cross right here. This is not true for these types of lines. This is called parallel lines. The best way to think about parallel lines is to think about the rails on a railway track. The metal rails, they never ever meet. I know sometimes you see rails that kind of like go on like this. However, these pairs of lines right here, they never meet. These ones right here are going to go on straight and they'll never meet. So the best way to think about it is lines of a railway. They go on beside each other forever and ever, but they never ever meet. Often you'll see parallel lines with arrows on both ends because they'll just be regular lines that just go on forever. And they'll have these little arrows right in the middle of them. those arrows right here, they signify that it's a parallel pair of lines. So sometimes, not always, you will see these arrows right beside each other. If you're given a sheet that has like labeled these lines, those arrows means that it's parallel. So that's usually a big giveaway if whether or not they are parallel, if you're a little unsure. However, today your questions will not have it because they'll just be too easy, but you'll be able to clearly tell that they're parallel lines because they just go on beside each other. It's not like you have to look really carefully because there's a very slight angle. No, it'll be really obvious. So this is called parallel lines. All right. These lines right here, where they cross paths and there's a point right here in the middle, these are called intersecting lines. So think about an intersection on a road. You often hear that is intersection. They cross paths and they have a point at some point in the middle. So they will cross and they'll meet somewhere, and that point will often have a label on it. In this case, I don't think they do. However, sometimes you'll see lines that say that will have a point and they'll be labeled like M or K or something like that. Today you don't have to worry about that, but that's when they meet. However, they're different from these two pairs of lines right here. These two pairs of lines are called perpendicular. Perpendicular lines are like intersecting lines, except when they cross paths, they cross at a 90-degree angle. Okay? Perpendicular lines will often look like a cross, or it can look like this. Or it can look like this. See how these ones here, they don't meet? However, if I were to extend these lines, so if I were to show you arrows at the end, because that means those lines can go on forever, this line can therefore be extended because there's no ends to them when they have arrows at the end, right? So I could technically extend this line and look, oh, they cross, and they cross at 90 degrees. So 90 degrees is that straight angle where one goes straight up and down and the other goes straight side to side. So perpendicular is, think about that as like a perfect intersection on a road. So here we have, let's say this is First Street and this is Second Street. First Street and Second Street, they cross at a perfect 90-degree angle. Intersecting lines are not a 90-degree angle. So if you see two lines cross but they're not 90 degrees, it's intersecting. If they are exactly 90 degrees, it's perpendicular. Okay. Now we have this last pair of lines here. So these lines here, they do not cross with one another, and they're not parallel because they're not going at the same angle. They would meet if I extended these lines. Can't be perpendicular because they don't cross at a 90-degree angle. So these ones right here are actually just called non-parallel lines because they run side by side, but if I extended those lines, they would meet. So difference between this and intersecting, they have a meeting point. So you can see clearly that the lines do cross. Parallel, when they're drawn out on the sheet itself, they are not actually meeting. They're just drawn there for you. And they're just drawn at an angle that looks like if I extended those lines, they would meet, but they're not actually meeting from what you see. So this would be intersecting. This would be non-parallel. Okay. And that's all that second sheet is going to be, is you basically label, is it parallel, intersecting, perpendicular, or non-parallel? So that's that. The other one will be line segment, rays, lines, and points, and then you label it with the letters that are given for those points. And that's all it is going to be for today. is basically labeling lines and pairs of lines. So it's going to be due Wednesday by 10 p.m. And that is it for today. Thank you guys. I hope you had a fantastic weekend, and I will see you on Wednesday.